Okay. So wait, so very quickly, this is for the students who are not here. For those who are joining us on the recording, we just took the test on Google Classroom. So feel free to do the test first and then look at this after you finish the test. Okay. So to get started, for the first question, what we see is expect to learn detailed subject matter, right? So one thing that even before, okay, so as bad as it sounds, the answer is just D. And the reason I know that is because it's the shortest choice. But the idea is testing you here is actually parallel structure. So scientists are expected to learn critical thinking skills. So they're expected to learn one, expected to learn two, and expected to learn three. So the idea is since to learn is already here, expected to learn is already mentioned there. We do not need to repeat learn again, right? Which are B, C, and A. So the answer is D. And it's also the most concise choice. But yeah, in this case, it's because of parallel structure. It's testing you. They're expected to learn one, two, and three. And within the three itself, we don't want expected to learn any of those words. Okay, number two, we look at this and we see it's a punctuation question, right? So we want to check first, this is comma and, so we want to check if the sentence before is a complete sentence and the sentence after is a complete sentence. So let's look at that very quickly. First, for sentence before, however, both the public at large and scientists themselves will benefit if scientists' training were to include development of effective communication skills. Okay, both would benefit, right? That's the subject and verb. What about the back? The public would learn about exciting research findings while scientists would see. Okay, so you have two complete sentences here. So then what do we want to use to join two complete sentences? Well, we know it can't be B and C, right? Then we want to then pick between A and D. Now, which one is the better choice? So we know that the use of a semicolon, is to list, define, or explain after a complete sentence. So I think in this case, the A is a better choice because if you have a semicolon, you'll notice that the back portion is explaining how so the first sentence is saying how the scientists and the public will benefit, right? But it doesn't explain how they'll benefit. The second portion explains how the public can learn about exciting stuff or the scientists will see increased support. So there's two different, like even though they will both benefit, it's for two different reasons. So then A is a better choice because it kind of explains after a complete sentence. This is just a rather generic additive portion, right? You're using comma and to join two sentences together, but it doesn't really illustrate the relationship properly. So A is the better choice for these two. Okay, which of the following sets up the discussion in the following paragraph? So we want to look at, basically when it comes to this, right? We want to look at the following paragraph or what they're saying later on in the paragraph. Usually you could just read the next sentence. So if we see the next sentence, we see books by scientists such as Carl Sagan and Stephen Hawking have sold millions of copies and spread interest in astronomy and physics. So basically books written by scientists have made more people interested in science. Okay, researchers who are able to explain their findings clearly and concisely can do something. So what can they do, right? If a researcher can explain their findings, what can they do? We don't know what can they do. We don't know what they can do, but we do know that they inspired millions. So come from a variety of scientific fields. No, that's not what the next sentence talks about, right? What about potentially make a great deal of money? Could be true because they sold millions of copies, but they inspired interest. So this one fits this, does not fit this. Help shape popular perception of science. I think that one fits this idea here very well. Contribute to public policy debate. We didn't talk about public policy debate. So the answer is C. Next, inspire the scientists can even help shape public policy. Okay, so in spite of this, in spite of what? This is not in spite, right? The relationship between this sentence and this sentence is in addition, right? In a sense that this one tells you reason one, right? They can spread interest. And this one says they can even do this. So that's kind of like in addition to one, it can also do two. So it's not in spite of this because in spite will be opposite, right? If you guys remember grammar point 6, this is where we talk about the different relationship the words can have, like in spite and however being opposite, in addition being like and similar and stuff like that. In conclusion, no, because they're talking about two different things. So it's not a conclusion. In short is also not the case because they're talking about two different things. So the answer is D in some cases. While most researchers will not reach as many people as these celebrated figures have, that's just the correct way of saying it. So if we check the other choices, will not reach as many people as the reach, researchers will not reach as many people as the reach of these celebrated figures. That's not correct, right? We're comparing researchers' reach to the celebrities' reach, right? Talking about both their reaches. So this one is comparing we're comparing researcher to celebrity, sorry. So we're comparing researchers to celebrity figures, right? So this is saying that we're comparing, for B, we're comparing the researchers to the reach of the celebrity figures, which is not the case. Having those celebrated figures is not proper grammar, and those reading celebrity, this is just not proper grammar for D as well. Those reading celebrated figures have scientists today, yeah, basically, A is just the best one in this case, right? Definition-wise and grammatically. I think the phrasing of these other three are a bit awkward. So one thing that you also notice about this test that could potentially make it harder is that they do have like phrases that are just kind of awkward. It sounds awkward if you guys were to read it. And usually I just eliminate those. But like, and because it's technically grammatically awkward, it's not wrong. It's just really awkward, right? The new test will not have these type of questions, basically. So in a way, the new test is much easier because it's straightforward, just on the grammar rules that we tested, right? If you guys look at the homework, that's more reminiscent of that. Okay, look at number 6. We look at the question. We see semicolon, right? We also see commas. So we know this is a punctuation question. Now we then look. Scientists today have many means of publicizing their research, including blogs, magazine articles, and interviews. So it's 1, 2, 3, which is 1, 2, and 3. Straightforward enough. The answer is C. Right. So, yes. And the reason, so one thing I would say is blogs, magazine articles. So the reason why is this one wrong? So we know it could be 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? You can also know it's 1, 2, 3. So, oh, sorry, and 3. So what's the difference between, so this is kind of niche, but what's the difference between C and D is that C is still right. And the reason why C is right is because we see blogs, plural, articles, plural, and interviews, plural, right? The problem with D is that it says blog, magazine, singular, articles, and then interviews. So we know that this cannot be a separate thing. We know it can't be 1, 2, 3, and 4. It has to be 1, 2, 2, and 3. Okay? It's because the plurality here is wrong. Okay, next, they must cultivate their ability to communicate. And the reason why we only choose A is because it says communicate with non-specialists in ways that are clear and engaging. So clearly to convey information, to communicate. So this is just repeating communicate, right? So we don't want that. And for these two, the idea of clearly already expressed later on. So we don't want to repeat that. So we just pick the shortest one. That is also the most concise and precise. Number 8, communication skills are perhaps the biggest deal, or in this case, you just look at the choices, right? So what maintains the best tone, which is most essential, right? It's the most academic tone. Next, scientists must often apply to public and provide and public funding organizations for resources to conduct their research. So they're considering dealing the underlying portion. Their funding proposals are read by non-experts as well as experts, right? So should the underlying portion be kept or not kept? So they must apply to public and private funding organizations to conduct their research. So do you think we should keep this? I think innately, I do think it's a little bit off topic. Like it feels a little bit unrelated to what we're talking about, right? So intuitively, I do kind of want to remove it, but then we want to analyze the back portion as well. So let's see. Because so let's first ignore kept, delete. These questions don't exist anymore, but this is just how you'll solve them. You ignore the first word and you just look at the reasons. It sets up the claim the researcher has made in the following sentence. Researchers must therefore explain the significance of their work to people without much background knowledge. That does kind of make sense, right? As rare as it sounds. Because provide a detailed explanation of how this research is funded. No, this one does not explain how research is funded. It just says they have to propose to experts and non-experts. Right? Because it introduces a distinction between expert and non-experts. No, it doesn't. It just says they present to two experts and non-experts, but it doesn't distinguish between the two groups. Distracts from communication from the focus of the communication of the scientist. No, it doesn't. It's a continuation of that. It doesn't distract from it. So the answer is A. But yeah, even though initially my intuition is that it seems to not be related, like you don't want to add that, the sentence afterwards does suggest you need to have that information there. I'll conclude the paragraph by explaining the significance of the information provided in the paragraph. So we're talking right now, from this article, we know that communication is important because being able to convey your research to people who don't necessarily understand your topic, the non-experts, right, is very important when it comes to funding and also interest in science. Okay, vital funding organization raise more money? No, that's not what we talked about. Ability to write acceptable grant proposal directly reflects how and what research is done. Could be. Turn to proposals to ensure that the best way of gaining funding? No. And then for A, communication among scientists use specializing other people will not understand? No. So the answer is C. Okay. That one concerns the information provided in the paragraph, the most significant information provided in the paragraph. Increasingly, as scientists recognize, right? This is just a verb. So one thing we'll see here is would is past tense, right? They would have done it, but they didn't. So past tense. This is will be, so it's future. Recognize is present tense. And then recognize is past tense. If you look at the sentence, colleges are, right? So one sentence, one tense. This is present tense. We choose C. Next, in the 1960s and 70s, a new genre of music, rock in Espanol, rock in Spanish. So the idea is emerged, right? So what's your subject? Your subject is, remove the time phrase, genre emerged. So that means we want to separate, and we could delete off music because it's a preposition, right? So it's a modifier. So we know that subject and verb are both here, and we know there's a comma here, which means that we must isolate the part in the middle, right? Because after a comma, if we have a comma and no comma back here, then we kind of eat up the verb. So the idea is we need a comma both before music. If we either have a comma here and here, or we don't have any commas at all, right? So let's check. So for A, we have a comma here, but no comma here. So it can't be A. If we have B, we have both commas, so that's correct. If we have C, look at C, we're missing a comma back here. Look at D, we're missing a comma here. So the answer is B. And does that make sense? This is just a equals to B rule, right? The music is called rock in Espanol, rock in Spanish. So A equals to B. If A equals to B, we'll put two commas, right? So like let's say today, Engu, comma, my teacher, right? Teacher, comma, right? Engu equals to my teacher. Or you can say Engu, comma, a teacher, right? So A is less than B. Yeah, A is less than B. So we still put comma, comma. However, if it's my teacher, you have multiple teachers, Engu, then we don't need a comma, right? Because that's A is larger than B. Okay, so that's testing you that rule here. So you do need comma, comma. The answer is B. Writers considering revising the underlined portion to the following. Here, they're basically adding a section, a form of rock and roll that incorporates elements of traditional Latin music. And I think innately, once again, we don't have to think about yes, yes, no, and no. We just look at the reasons. It provides important introductory information. Yes. Explains why the genre began in this region. No. Right. There's no mention of the Rio de la Plata region. Repeats information about musical genres in the first sentence. Nope. Interrupts the discussion of this with loosely related information. No. So the answer is A. Okay. B, millions of fans worldwide. International fans are already worldwide, so we don't need the repetition. Worldwide fans everywhere, repeated. International fans all over the world, that's repeated, so the answer is A. The Rio de la Plata region is known for a rich musical heritage, right? Next, was captivating a young audience all over the world, including. Remember, we said this is the E. So this includes, it's a subject and verb, and obviously the sentence before is a complete sentence because guitar, drums, music popular in US was. So the guitar, drums, music, that's a subject. Popular in the US and Great Britain, you can remove this, was. Music was captivating young audience, right? So we know that is a complete sentence, but if we have, okay, so for A, no change. The idea is this is a sentence fragment, right? Because including is a present participle, which we know is a modifier starter. So from here all the way to the next comma, we can delete, but then there is no comma. So we delete the entire sentence. So that's a sentence fragment. So it can't be A. For B, this includes subject and verb. This is a comma splice. For C, if we are using this, we don't want and, because the use of a colon is to list, define, or explain, meaning the and is already implicit. So you don't need to bring this up again. So the answer is D. For number 17, I didn't want to create Beatles in Spanish, he said. So he doesn't want to create this. And instead, what they did was something else, right? So it's kind of, he doesn't want to do this, and then they did something else. So relationship between the two sentences is opposite. So the answer is instead. I kind of just gave the answer very implicitly when I was saying this, because it was I think it's pretty obvious what they're saying, right? This genre soon became a sensation in Mexico. So we want to talk about the effective introduction that talks about a topic discussed. So if you look at just later, right? It says the Mexican band Cafe Cuba, one acclaims elsewhere. They even went to the US, went to OA, right? So they went beyond, let's say, where they were introduced. So garnered musical award? No. Right? Deviated from what they have envisioned? No. Became a sensation in Mexico? Sure, it became a sensation in Mexico, but they didn't talk about Mexico here. I mean, they talk about Mexico, but they also talk about the US. So it went beyond Mexico, right? And so basically, it spread beyond Argentina and Uruguay, because it's not only Mexico we're talking about Mexico and the US and other places perhaps. So the answer should be D. Next, the best word is just distinctive. This is just the word that fits the idea here the most. Discriminant, for it's indiscriminate just means everyone can use it. So that shouldn't be the word. It's the opposite of what we want. Divergent just means you use it differently. Doesn't mean it's better. Individual just means you use it once. And then distinctive means it's like noteworthy, right? It picks up your attention. Next, number 20. Los Lobos' diverse influences are evident in the variety of instruments the band plays. So the band plays instruments, right? The band is singular, so it should be plays. If you guys will notice also, this is plural, right? Play is plural. Are playing is plural. Have played is also plural. So the only singular choice is here. So just by looking at the choices, you know it's testing you probably about plurality and like polarity. So if it's plural, if it's singular. And yeah, we choose a singular choice. Okay. Sets out the main point of the sentence. So the sentence, let's look. The sentence starts from up here. It says, both offer their unique spin on their original fusion, right? This first music blends traditional sounds with elements of rock and hip hop. And this other one uses something. So they do something, right? But we don't know what they do, but it has to be fusion related to continue the idea, the main point of the sentence. The main point of the sentence is that two branches, this thing and this thing, kind of came out of rock de español, and they became kind of fusions. So for A, uses nostalgic tango, that's fine, but it doesn't talk about fusion, so maybe. Draws on the rhythmic cumbia, but also the elements of the Beatles, that's fusion, right? We're mixing two types of music together, that's good. Enlisted this guy to produce their solo album, no, right? Not about fusion music. Won awards, not about fusion music, so the answer is B. Here we see, show that rock and español is transcending not just cultural and geographical boundaries, but, right? Because it's not only, but also. So for generational ones too. There we go. When Gwen Ifill was starting out in journalism, not starting up in journalism, right? Next, while working in Baltimore, this person chronicled information, right? It's just the easiest one. Chronicled about the early generation, so it's just the shortest one. Just pick this one. This generation included this guy, who was elected the mayor of Baltimore, and this guy. So this generation included 1 and 2, with basically a description of them afterwards, right? So the idea is we look at this, we start here, we want a comma here, and we want a comma here. So the answer is just A, right? And the reason why is because we can remove the modifier. So we know this thing here is modifying this guy. So we can just remove this here. And likewise, this comma here everything here is modifying Jackson. So, yeah. So we can just remove, basically we want to have commas here and here to just remove the modifiers. Leaders of this generation won local elections, but victories in the state election was rare, right? Ones in the state, it isn't clear what one is referring to because it's not talking about elections. It's talking about winning, right? So it's just thinking about basically what is rare. So they won local elections, but winning the state elections are harder, right? So victories in the state election is what the one is referring to. Okay. Later on, if Phil reported on Booker and others in this generation, comma, right? So it's helping, right? And the reason why is because this, if you have this, she was helping, you have subject and verb, but you already know she reported, so that would be a comma splice. This one would just be a run-on. It's kind of awkward because you're missing a subject here, right? Like you want to end. So if Phil reported on Booker and others in this generation and helped focus the nation's attention, not just helped, right? In this case, you want a subordinate, or sorry, you want a modifier starter, which is helping. And then for A, she helped. So that's a run-on sentence again. So answer is, oh, sorry. The answer is B. 28. Then in the first decade, a group of African-American politicians began achieving wider success. So when I read this, I immediately think about the sentence I just read 2 questions ago. Victories in this local election were rare, and then those in the state election were even rarer, right? But then in the first century, they started winning a lot. So I think no matter what, I think it'll fit here. So that's after sentence 3, and that's just the answer. What choice provides the most effective transition for the discussion that follows? So basically, this is saying that she had become a White House correspondent. A decade later, she became the first African-American woman to host a national television talk. So effective transition to the idea that followed in the paragraph, basically, she was making a lot of progress as a journalist, right? So worked as a journalist in Boston to stop her past, which we don't really care about. Earned a degree, no, not about the degree. Noted that African-American politicians depend on broad coalition to accomplish their goals, not talked about later. And so we talked about kind of her accomplishments. You know, she became the first African-American woman to host a television talk. She worked as a White House correspondent in the New York Times. These are all accomplishments. So that's what we want to draw to. Number 30 combines the underlying portion of the sentence. So she became the first African-American woman to host a nationally televised political talk show, right? This is, of course, if it's a nationally televised talk show, it's also a long-running news program. But it can, what is it called? It's called a long-running news program. I can remove all of this, called the Washington Week in Review, right? So just that. B just works the best. If you guys look at the absolute length, it's also the shortest, right? And it uses the least punctuation. So that's what in general what we're looking for. It flows the best. Later, they're considering to delete the underlying sentence. Should the writer delete it or keep it? So it says, the impact that vice presidential and presidential debates have on election outcomes is the subject of much debate. So it's saying like we don't really know if the vice presidential and presidential debates actually matter. Okay, but does it provide an appropriate conclusion to the paragraph? No, the paragraph is talking about if filled, not the national debates, right? It keeps the details, because the details it provides supports one of the passion idea. No, it's talking about the journalist, not the debate. So A and B both seem strong. Unnecessary repeats information provides elsewhere. No, the passage didn't talk about this information at all. Information offers is relevant to the main discussion of the paragraph. That's true. So the answer is D. Okay, looking at the question here, we see this. So we want to check for complete sentences. So let's see. Comma so we already know it's a complete sentence. So as a previous generation, okay, no, so this is actually interesting. So this is just a phrasing problem. The idea is that this is actually not a complete sentence. It's just a modifier, but they start a sentence, so they led the way for the new generation of journalists, right? A CNN reporter says that we just don't want a punctuation. It's fine. A is the best, right? If we do this, then this will become subject and verb, but then that will be a comma splice, so it can't be D. And then, sorry, the answer is B. I mean, you don't want anything, right? Having a comma here makes it unnecessarily complicated. You don't want a comma, you don't want commas here at all. Then number 33, wants to emphasize the main point. So the main point of the passage is that she is very important, right? As in, she helped kind of start a lot of, I think she was a prominent figure, that's in African-American journalism. Okay. So emphasize the main point discussed in the passage, which most effectively aligned to the goal. As an advocate for public television and a mentor for journalists could be. As a winner of the award and other journalist prizes, no, we didn't talk about that. Of engaging the public in US political conversation and reporting African-American achievements, yes, that's where she started off doing. As a successful newspaper reporter, no. So the answer should be C. Right. And the idea is because we never talked for A, the reason is because advocate for public television, like sure, she had her own television program, but we don't really know if she like advocated that hard for it. And also there's no mention of her becoming a mentor, even though that does sound like accurate enough. C is the better choice because the paragraphs explicitly didn't mention, let's say, engaging US conversation. Okay, now next we have the plant's response to temperature. So here we see there's an apostrophe question. So one thing that we can immediately rule out is if it's plants, this is singular, and this is plural, so the answer cannot be C. Same thing here, plants, and this is singular. This is plural, this is singular, cannot be A. So now we should have to figure out if the plant is singular or plural. The appearance of the flower on a plant marks a change from the plant. So if it's on a plant, then it's singular. So the answer is B. Next, environmental cues is the most formal way of phrasing this phrase, whatever this is. Next, combining the sentence. So in general, some of these plants are exposed to a lower temperature, and plants exposed to a lower temperature would flower much later. So this, right? Now, what's the difference between C and D? C says low temperature plants, but the plants themselves are not low temperature, as in like, it's not like this plant is like 2 degrees Celsius and this one is like 10 degrees Celsius. No, they're the same plant, but then plant A is in a lower, colder environment. So it's exposed to a lower temperature, whereas plant B is not. The answer is C. Number 37, if you look at this, it's testing a subject or verb, right? We're tracking results, basically. So lower temperatures have found to delay the production of lower activators and the flowering that results, because flowering is singular, so results. Okay. Next, transition on a preceding paragraph. So they're trying to figure out if basically colder temperature would make the plant like grow faster or grow slower, right? So to answer this question is the question they brought up in the previous paragraph. So to answer this will be what this paragraph is about. So the answer is D. Then we look at the graph. They found 3 varieties, among them ND0, which flowers at approximately 60 plants at 23 degrees Celsius. So ND0, 23 degrees Celsius is a little more than 15, but less than 20 by a significant margin. So yes, the answer is 16. Next, once again, we don't, considering deleting the underlying portion, I just look at the underlying portion first. The KZ9 flower, which flowers with more leaves per plant as the temperature rises. So KZ9, as temperature rises, more leaf per plant. Is that true? That's not true. So immediately, I don't want to keep the sentence because it just presents the wrong information. Repeats the information from early? No. Repeats inaccurate information from the graph? Yes. So the answer is D. Next, in each of the mutant varieties, 2 genes, this, were found to have mutations. So genes work, right? And the thing about this is 2 genes, and it's A equals to B. So since A equals to B, we want comma, comma. So the answer is A. So there's missing a comma here, missing a comma here. The comma you don't put here, you put here. So the answer is A. Look at number 42. Further study enabled, sorry. Here, in non-mutant plants, the protein products, so I'll just remove the modifier, the protein products and the genes bind to each other, and then together, what do they do together? Together, they repress, right? So they bind and repress, right? Has to be the same. because what do the products do? The products bind, and then the products repress. So once again, this is just very important to get good at identifying subject and verbs, right? 43, once you conclude a paragraph with a statement that accurately characterizes the outcome. So we know that, let's read the sentence before. So at 16 degrees, the protein binding is prevalent. So therefore, blocking floral activator production. So at 16, at 16 degrees Celsius, the protein binding exists. So since the protein exists, it stops the flower from like growing, right? Whereas at 23 degrees Celsius, there's less these two proteins, which should allow the production to happen because there's more of these. There are fewer of these. So the relationship is that if it's cold, there's more FLM and SVP, which stops flowers from occurring. If it's warm, then there's less of this, which means there will be more flowers. So allowing production to occur is correct. Production remains blocked, no. Inhibiting floral activators, no. That would be what's happening up here. Changing the shape, no, we don't talk about shape at all. We didn't talk about shape at all. So answer is A. And last question. So effect and affect. Effect is a noun, affect is a verb. The molecules demonstrate, so we have the verb here, so it cannot be affect. So it has to be effect. So is it for which or that? In this case, it's that. The effect that environmental factors have. Answer is B. Okay, I just like went through the entire test. I low-key yapped for a while. But is there any like particular question you guys want more explanation on? Oh wait, I just went on a journey. I just like spoke for like 40 minutes. Okay. Yeah, any specific question you guys aren't sure, like why I said the answer is what, or anything that you guys have noted? No? Oh, for Brandon and Alex, if you guys are here, okay, you guys send me your answers for the test. I haven't received it yet. And then for Isabella, Eva, and Ethan, do you guys have any questions in particular about the test?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. Isabella and Ethan? No? Okay, hopefully it makes sense. So hopefully it makes sense. Really, I kind of dislike this older test because it's not reflective. I mean, it's reflective as in like they're still testing you grammar, right? But it's not obviously like the practice questions that we have been doing, which I think is okay because it still tests you grammar. And I think if more importantly, I think a lot of you guys might struggle with time. So this is, if anything, this is a good practice on time and just doing the test and figuring out questions. But yeah, but since this is our last class, and once again, I don't want to use the formal material that I have because we haven't covered the reading section yet, right? So yeah, hopefully you guys did okay. I haven't checked it yet. I will check after the class ends. But hopefully you guys did okay. Hopefully this makes sense. And if anything, if you guys are planning to take the SAT, one thing I would say is for the grammar section, it's just very repetitive, right? So practice definitely makes perfect in that regards. As in, if you guys just like are able to go through all the practice questions I've posted on Google Classroom, you guys will probably be more than okay in doing really well in the grammar section at least. Because the questions are just repeated, right? It's just the same question over and over again. So yeah. Let me see. Let me find where's my Google Classroom? There you go. Yeah. So if you guys just do all the material, if you just go through all the materials that we've covered through grammar, I think specifically grammar points 1 to 6. I mean, those are the foundational material, right? Once you cover those, everything else should be pretty straightforward. Okay. Okay, yeah. Brandon, send me the answers on Google Classroom. I'll be looking out for those. Send it. I don't know if you can send it here because I think this is class comment. Can you like email it to me maybe? My email should just be available here. Oh, well, I don't want to leave, but yeah, you'll be able to see my email here. Yeah, or I'll just send you my email. I'll send you my email in the chat right now too. Okay, yeah. So I know we finished a bit faster than I anticipated. We still have like a few minutes left, but it's fine because there's not anything else I really want to cover, unless you guys want to cover the homework, but I know a lot of you guys did it, so I'll give you guys feedback on those soon. And yeah, are there any questions? Okay, if not, then I think that's it for our grammar class. Hopefully, I'll see you guys when we're covering reading as well as the entire test as a whole. Okay, I don't know when that will start, but yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys there. Yeah, I think that's it.